Herodotus gave a mythological account of Cyrus's early life. In this account, Astyages had two prophetic dreams in which a flood and then a series of fruit-bearing vines emerged from his daughter Mandane's pelvis and covered the entire kingdom. These were interpreted by his advisors as a foretelling that his grandson would one day rebel and supplant him as king. Astyages summoned Mandane, at the time pregnant with Cyrus, back to Ecbatana to have the child killed. His general Harpagus delegated the task to Mithridates, one of the shepherds of Astyages, who raised the child and passed off his stillborn son to Harpagus as the dead infant Cyrus. Cyrus lived in secrecy, but when he reached the age of 10, during a childhood game, he had the son of a nobleman beaten when he refused to obey Cyrus's commands. As it was unheard of for the son of a shepherd to commit such an act, Astyages had the boy brought to his court and interviewed him and his adoptive father. Upon the shepherd's confession, Astyages sent Cyrus back to Persia to live with his biological parents. However, Astyages summoned the son of Harpagus and, in retribution, chopped him to pieces, roasted some portions while boiling others, and tricked his advisor into eating his child during a large banquet. Following the meal, Astyages' servants brought Harpagus the head, hands, and feet of his son on platters so he could realize his inadvertent cannibalism. Cyrus the Great succeeded to the throne in 559 BC, following his father's death. However, Cyrus was not yet an independent ruler. Like his predecessors, Cyrus had to recognize Median overlordship. Astyages, last king of the Median Empire and Cyrus's grandfather, may have ruled over the majority of the ancient Near East, from the Lydian frontier in the west to the lands of the Parthians and Persians in the east. According to the Nabonidus Chronicle, Astyages launched an attack against Cyrus, king of Ansan. According to the historian Herodotus, it is known that Astyages placed Harpagus in command of the Median army to conquer Cyrus. However, Harpagus contacted Cyrus and encouraged his revolt against Media, before eventually defecting along with several of the nobility and a portion of the army. This mutiny is confirmed by the Nabonidus Chronicle. The chronicle suggests that the hostilities lasted for at least 3 years, 553 to 550 BC, and the final battle resulted in the capture of Ecbatana. According to the historians Herodotus and Ctesias, Cyrus spared the life of Astyages and married his daughter, Amytis. This marriage pacified several vassals, including the Bactrians, Parthians, and Saka. Herodotus notes that Cyrus also subdued and incorporated Sogdia into the empire during his military campaigns of 546 to 539 BC. With Astyages out of power, all of his vassals, including many of Cyrus's relatives, were now under his command. His uncle Arsames, who had been the king of the city-state of Parsa under the Medes, therefore would have had to give up his throne. However, this transfer of power within the family seems to have been smooth, and it is likely that Arsames was still the nominal governor of Parsa under Cyrus's authority, more a prince or a grand duke than a king. His son, Hystaspes, who was also Cyrus's second cousin, was then made satrap of Parthia and Phrygia. Cyrus the Great thus united the twin Achaemenid kingdoms of Parsa and Anshan into Persia proper. Arsames lived to see his grandson become Darius the Great, Shahanshah of Persia, after the deaths of both of Cyrus's sons. Cyrus's conquest of Media was merely the start of his wars.
The exact dates of the Lydian conquest are unknown, but it must have taken place between Cyrus's overthrow of the Median kingdom, 550 BC, and his conquest of Babylon, 539 BC. It was common in the past to give 547 BC as the year of the conquest due to some interpretations of the Nabonidus Chronicle, but this position is currently not much held. The Lydians first attacked the Achaemenid Empire's city of Caria in Cappadocia. The king of Lydia, Croesus, besieged and captured the city, enslaving its inhabitants. Meanwhile, the Persians invited the citizens of Ionia, who were part of the Lydian kingdom, to revolt against their ruler. The offer was rebuffed, and thus Cyrus levied an army and marched against the Lydians, increasing his numbers while passing through nations in his way. The Battle of Pteria was effectively a stalemate. with both sides suffering heavy casualties by nightfall. Croesus retreated to Sardis the following morning. While in Sardis, Croesus sent out requests for his allies to send aid to Lydia. However, near the end of the winter, before the allies could unite, Cyrus the Great pushed the war into Lydian territory and besieged Croesus and his capital, Sardis. Shortly before the final battle of Thymbra between the two rulers, Harpagus advised Cyrus the Great to place his dromedaries in front of his warriors. The Lydian horses, not used to the dromedary smell, would be very afraid. The strategy worked. The Lydian cavalry was routed. Cyrus defeated and captured Croesus. Cyrus occupied the capital at Sardis, conquering the Lydian kingdom in 546 BCE. According to Herodotus, Cyrus the Great spared Croesus' life and kept him as an advisor. But this account conflicts with some translations of the contemporary Nabonidus Chronicle, which interpret that the king of Lydia was slain. Before returning to the capital, Commagene was incorporated into Persia in 546 BCE. Later, a Lydian named Pactias was entrusted by Cyrus the Great to send Croesus' treasury to Persia. However, soon after Cyrus's departure, Pactias hired mercenaries and caused an uprising in Sardis, revolting against the Persian satrap of Lydia, Abalus. Cyrus sent Mazares, one of his commanders, to subdue the insurrection, but demanded that Pactias be returned alive. Upon Mazares' arrival, Pactias fled to Ionia, where he had hired more mercenaries. Mazares marched his troops into the Greek country and subdued the cities of Magnesia and Priene. The fate of Pactias is unknown, but after capture, he was probably sent to Cyrus and put to death after being tortured. Mazares continued the conquest of Asia Minor, but died of unknown causes during his campaign in Ionia. Cyrus sent Harpagus to complete Mazares' conquest of Asia Minor. Harpagus captured Lycia, Aeolia, and Caria, using the technique of building earthworks to breach the walls of besieged cities, a method unknown to the Greeks. He ended his conquest of the area in 542 BC.
After the conquest of Lydia, Cyrus campaigned in the east between around 545 BC to 540 BC. Cyrus first tried to conquer Gedrosia. However, he was decisively defeated and departed Gedrosia. Gedrosia was most likely conquered during the reign of Darius I. After the failed attempt to conquer Gedrosia, Cyrus attacked the regions of Bactria, Arachosia, Sogdia, Saka, Chorasmia, Margiana, and other provinces in the east. In 533 BC, Cyrus the Great crossed the Hindu Kush mountains and collected tribute from the Indus cities. Thus, Cyrus probably had established vassal states in western India. Cyrus then returned with his army to Babylon due to the unrest taking place in and around Babylon. By the year 540 BC, Cyrus captured Elam and its capital, Susa. The Nabonidus Chronicle records that, prior to the battles, the king of the Neo-Babylonian Empire, Nabonidus, had ordered cult statues from outlying Babylonian cities to be brought into the capital, suggesting that the conflict had begun possibly in the winter of 540 BC. Just before October 539 BC, Cyrus fought the Battle of Opis in or near the strategic riverside city of Opis on the Tigris, north of Babylon. The Babylonian army was routed, and on 10th of October, Sippar was seized without a battle, with little to no resistance from the populace. It is probable that Cyrus engaged in negotiations with the Babylonian generals to obtain a compromise on their part, and therefore avoid an armed confrontation. Nabonidus, who had retreated to Sippar following his defeat at Opis, fled to Borsippa. Around 12th October, Persian general Gubaru's troops entered Babylon, again without any resistance from the Babylonian armies, and detained Nabonidus. Herodotus explains that to accomplish this feat, the Persians, using a basin dug earlier by the Babylonian queen Nitocris to protect Babylon against Median attacks, diverted the Euphrates River into a canal so that the water level dropped to the height of the middle of a man's thigh, which allowed the invading forces to march directly through the riverbed to enter at night. Shortly thereafter, Nabonidus returned from Borsippa and surrendered to Cyrus. On the 29th of October, Cyrus entered the city of Babylon. Prior to Cyrus's invasion of Babylon, the Neo-Babylonian Empire had conquered many kingdoms. In addition to Babylonia, Cyrus probably incorporated its subnational entities into his empire, including Syria, Judea, and Arabia Petraea, although there is no direct evidence to support this assumption. After taking Babylon, Cyrus the Great proclaimed himself King of Babylon, King of Sumer and Akkad, King of the Four Corners of the World, in the famous Cyrus cylinder, an inscription on a cylinder that was deposited in the foundations of the Esagila temple dedicated to the chief Babylonian god, Marduk. The text of the cylinder denounces Nabonidus as impious and portrays the victorious Cyrus as pleasing the god Marduk. It describes how Cyrus had improved the lives of the citizens of Babylonia, repatriated displaced peoples, and restored temples and cult sanctuaries. Although some have asserted that the cylinder represents a form of human rights charter, historians generally portray it in the context of a long-standing Mesopotamian tradition of new rulers beginning their reigns with declarations of reforms. Cyrus the Great's dominions composed the largest empire the world had ever seen to that point. At the end of Cyrus's rule, the Achaemenid Empire stretched from Asia Minor in the west to the Indus River in the east. Details of Cyrus's death vary by account. Ctesias in his Persica has the longest account, which says Cyrus met his death while putting down resistance from the Derbyshire infantry, aided by other Scythian archers and cavalry, plus Indians and their war elephants. According to him, this event took place northeast of the headwaters of the Sir Daria. The account of Herodotus from his histories provides the second longest detail, in which Cyrus met his fate in a fierce battle with the Massagetae, a Scythian tribal confederation from the southern deserts of Khwarezm and Kizilkum in the southernmost portion of the Eurasian steppe regions of modern-day Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan, following the advice of Croesus to attack them in their own territory. The Massagetae were related to the Scythians in their dress and mode of living. They fought on horseback and on foot. In order to acquire her realm, Cyrus first sent an offer of marriage to their ruler, the Empress Tomyris, a proposal she rejected. He then commenced his attempt to take Massagetae territory by force, beginning by building bridges and towered warboats along his side of the river Oxus, or Amu Darya, which separated them. Sending him a warning to cease his encroachment, Tomyris challenged him to meet her forces in honorable warfare, inviting him to a location in her country a day's march from the river, where their two armies would formally engage each other. He accepted her offer, but learning that the Massagetae were unfamiliar with wine and its intoxicating effects, he set up and then left camp with plenty of it behind, taking his best soldiers with him and leaving the least capable ones. The general of Tomyris's army, Spargapises, who was also her son, and a third of the Massagettian troops killed the group Cyrus had left there and, finding the camp well stocked with food and the wine, unwittingly drank themselves into inebriation, diminishing their capability to defend themselves when they were then overtaken by a surprise attack. They were successfully defeated, and although he was taken prisoner, Spargapises committed suicide once he regained sobriety. Upon learning of what had transpired, Tomyris denounced Cyrus's tactics as underhanded and swore vengeance, leading a second wave of troops into battle herself. Cyrus the Great was ultimately killed, and his forces suffered massive casualties in what Herodotus referred to as the fiercest battle of his career in the ancient world. When it was over, Tomyris ordered the body of Cyrus brought to her, then decapitated him and dipped his head in a vessel of blood in a symbolic gesture of revenge for his bloodlust and the death of her son. However, some scholars question this version, mostly because even Herodotus admits this event was one of many versions of Cyrus's death that he heard from a supposedly reliable source, who told him no one was there to see the aftermath. Herodotus also recounts that Cyrus saw in his sleep the oldest son of Hystaspes, Darius I, with wings upon his shoulders, shadowing with the one wing Asia and with the other wing Europe. Archaeologist Sir Max Mallowan explains this statement by Herodotus and its connection with the four-winged bas-relief figure of Cyrus the Great in the following way. Herodotus, therefore, as I surmise, may have known of the close connection between this type of winged figure and the image of Iranian majesty, which he associated with a dream prognosticating the king's death before his last fatal campaign across the Oxus. Muhammad Dandamayev says that Persians may have taken Cyrus's body back from the Massagetæ, unlike what Herodotus claimed. According to the Chronicle of Michael the Syrian, Cyrus was killed by his wife Tomaris, queen of the Massagetæ, in the 60th year of Jewish captivity. An alternative account from Xenophon's Cyropedia contradicts the others, claiming that Cyrus died peacefully at his capital. The final version of Cyrus's death comes from Berossus, who only reports that Cyrus met his death while warring against the Dahai archers northwest of the headwaters of the Sir Daria.